Okay, are we ready to let everyone in?
Yes. Alrighty, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Victoria and I work for CTRL. Before we get started, I'm just gonna give you all a few details. So this session is being recorded. We also have closed captions, and if you'd like to access that, you can click on your Zoom toolbar and it will be there. In addition, we're also having a survey put out in the chat at the end of the session with a link as well as a QR code. And we would really appreciate if you could fill it out. So with that being said, I will hand it over to our presenters, so let them get started. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll load up the slides real quick. Share screen, let's share the right one. All right. So I'm Jessica Breen, and I work in the University Library, along with my colleagues, Clarissa Issen, Olivia Ivy, and Ashley Ricamo. I'm going to talk about how we can go from sort of a reactive panic that we've seen in the media about AI in the classroom to having a more purposeful, thought out plan to help ourselves and our students prepare to navigate a world in which AI is part of their daily life. And so here are our learning outcomes for this session. By the end of the session, you'll be equipped to with practical strategies to use AI ethically and effectively in academic settings, tools to identify biases and limitations in AI, and insights on ensuring equitable AI resource access in classrooms, thereby fostering an inclusive learning environment. And so AI represents a paradigm shift in how we think about knowledge and knowledge creation. And significant as it is, this phenomenon is not an isolated occurrence. So in the history of our intellectual advancement, these things have happened over and over. These technological milestones have caused upheaval in how we think about knowledge creation. Wikipedia, for example, revolutionized access to information and democratized knowledge creation, but it also troubled our understanding of authoritative information and how we think about what citation does and what it's for. Similarly, Google search redefined how we retrieve and interact with information. And both of these things were heralded as the end of academic integrity. Even in his time, Plato worried about how writing and the written word were going to transform knowledge and knowledge sharing. So these transformative events, they are reoccurring in our intellectual journey. And each time they reshape our relationship with knowledge. So AI is the latest, but certainly not the final frontier in this sort of continuum. And what do we do about it? We're not going to make it go away. The existence of AI and its use is an inevitable part of our lives at this point. And if we're honest about it, AI has already been intricately woven into our daily routines. It's in that interaction with a customer service chatbot. It's the Roomba that cleans your living room. It's Siri putting reminders on your phone, or Netflix telling you what you ought to watch next. So the pervasive presence of AI underscores a critical responsibility for educators. We have to devise purposeful, informed strategies for teaching our students how to engage with these technologies effectively and ethically. Our goal should be to ensure that when our students leave our classrooms, they're not only adept at using current tools, but they're also equipped with the critical thinking skills necessary to responsibly navigate and adapt to future technological advancements. In essence, we're not teaching them just for the present, we're preparing them to be the conscientious architects and users of tomorrow's technology. Click the right button, we can go to the next slide. Oops, there we go. So my personal approach to this is not terribly dissimilar from what's traditionally been done in sex education. Hence, I'm dubbing my portion of the presentation the sex ed model of AI. And the core idea here is simply to demystify AI and promote its informed and ethical use. So, understanding the fundamentals. What is it? How does it work? Focusing on responsible use. How do you use it ethically? When do you use it? When do you not use it? And a cornerstone of effective sex education is to know and understand the correct terms. And that holds true for AI as well. So there are a few ways to categorize AI. You'll often hear the terms narrow or weak, general, and super. So a narrow or weak AI is trained on a very specific set of circumstances. A general AI can do normal human tasks, and a super AI has intelligence and capacity that exceeds that of humans. Or to make it a little bit easier to remember, WALL-E is a narrow AI. the girlfriend from Her, and Skynet. So to be clear, the only one of these exists in existence is narrow AI. Everything we have is WALL-E at some level or another. General AI and super AI are simply theoretical at this point in time. And then narrow AI can also be categorized even further down by its functionality. And so we have the idea of a reactive machine. These are things that can use specific inputs without using past experiences, things like a chess program that can play a game. We have limited memory concepts, so AI systems that use historical data to make decisions. These are things like self-driving cars that can actually take new input in and navigate roads, the kind that don't send you off into a pond when there's road work. There's also this concept of a theory of mind, and these are the ones that try to be more like human awareness and interaction. And we have self-aware AI. So these are things that are actually capable of thinking beyond what they've been taught. And again, a lot of these don't exist. The only ones that we do have are these two, reactive machines and limited memory. And so the examples of the reactive machine, these are IBM's Deep Blue, which played chess quite well. Your Netflix recommendations algorithm is also a reactive machine. And I don't know about yours, but mine is actually not very good. So reactive machines, they're still growing. Limited memory, this is Siri, this is Alexa, this is your Roomba. These are self-driving cars, as well as things like generative AI and ChatGPT. So a little bit of an even deeper dive into this terminology and how it all works, so that we can speak clearly and confidently when we're talking about AI. This diagram works us through the nested levels of taxonomy around ChatGPT, which is a very popular AI platform. And so we start at the outer ring here, we have artificial intelligence, which is an umbrella term that refers to systems or machines that behave like they're intelligent. And again, it's a behaving like they're intelligent, not that they are intelligent. And we have three kinds of those, right? The narrow, the general, and the super. Again, WALL-E, the girlfriend from Her, and Skynet. The next one down, after we get from narrow AI to machine learning. Machine learning is a technology that lets systems iteratively learn from large amounts of data so that they can identify patterns and they can make decisions with minimal human interaction, or intervention rather. We then have deep learning, the subset of machine learning. This uses artificial neural networks, so synthetic brains. They are sophisticated pattern recognition systems that are based on human brains, but they are not as complicated as human brains. They're just layers. Generative ABI, which is the big one that everyone talks about right now, is a branch of deep learning, and that's trying to make create or modify original content. So these algorithms, they use existing content, things like text or audio, video files. So they can even use computer code to create new content. And the idea is that they can generate content that looks like a human made it. And there are two main generative models that are in use. And these are GAN, which are generative adversarial networks, and transformers. And the two models have slightly different uses. A GAN is often used with non-textual data and with limited data sets. And transformers are used with sequential relationships. So they're really good at things like understanding and recreating human writing, because that has an in and output sort of relationship. Large language models, those are just really big language algorithms that can carry out natural language processing. So things like reading a text, summarizing a document, translating a language, generating computer code. And the key thing to remember about an LLM is it doesn't actually know or understand anything. All the responses it provides are based on patterns that it learned through its training. So this is WALL-E, not Her, and it's definitely not Skynet. And then we have below large language models, we get into the generative pre-trained transformers. That's what the GPT in ChatGPT stands for. These things create original content. And so all of OpenAI's tools, that's the people who make ChatGPT, and Meta's Llama, these are GPTs, the generative pre-trained transformers. And then finally, we get down to ChatGPT, which very often gets used as a shorthand for all of these things, but they are in fact different. ChatGPT is actually just a web interface for OpenAI's GPT models, 3.5 and 4, depending on how much you pay, determines which of those models you get to interact with. So Now that we've had this brief run through of the terminology around AI, my colleagues Olivia and Carissa are going to talk about how we might be able to move towards teaching responsible and ethical use of these tools using the ACRL literacy in higher ed framework. So I'm going to switch the slides.
Sure. So hello, I'm Olivia Ivy. I am an instruction librarian in AU's library. And so as we've had some conversations around campus and with my colleagues like Jesse and learning this terminology, the question that I've sort of had ruminating in my mind is, does the ACRL framework hold up in an era of generated AI, which is to say, amidst this idea of this sort of panic-based reaction, are we moving to a place of calm interaction with these tools, using tools we already have, or do we need to create new ones? So we'll be transitioning into more interactive portion of this webinar in just a minute. So but first, we'll kind of give you a little bit of information about what the ACRL framework is and what it's not, so that we can explore this question together. So the framework is meant to be a cluster of interconnected concepts. So if you look at the website for the framework, you'll see a list of 6 frames. But that list is meant to be interactive, right? These concepts speak to each other, and they help us inquire about information so that we understand it. Within each frame, there is a knowledge practice and dispositions that accompany each one. So you know you're becoming information literate as a person if you can sort of embody these knowledge practices and dispositions. The framework is not a checklist, right? Somewhere in your academic career, somebody might have sat down with you and talked about something like a CRAP test, right? Is this document current? Is it relevant? Do you know the author, right? And we're doing this sort of checklist to say good document, bad document. That's not what the information literacy framework is. It's trying to recognize that information is dynamic. So a super quick history on our next slide. Information for a long period of time was largely static. New editions had to be published, reprinted, put back out. It was very clear in these text-based tomes who an author is, who an editor is, who a publisher is. Information began to be more readily available online, and the amount of information we were asking ourselves and our students to evaluate on a daily basis sped up with the presence of the internet. But in those early years, we were still looking at a sort of internet presentation of static information. And so some of our information literacy tools at that time were more checklist based because they're sort of looking at this idea of good or bad. Enter tools more like Wikipedia. Information is becoming more dynamic. It's becoming crowdsourced, right? So these images are kind of looking at encyclopedias, but we see this in other genres of publication as well. We see it with the news. We even see it with the ways academics have been engaging blogs and podcasts to accompany their published works, right? So in this era of dynamic crowdsourced information, we need information literacy tools that can be more responsive, more interactive, and more inquiry-based. So we're going to tee up for you next 4 of the 6 frames, and then we're going to have a discussion. Do these frames give us the tools we need to be critical, thoughtful consumers and producers of information? So starting with the first frame, these numbers, by the way, are arbitrary, again, interconnected. But for the sake of numbering our breakout rooms and keeping us on track, we've numbered them here. So authority is constructed and contextual, and this is one of my favorite frames. It's telling us that who our creators are shapes some of the faith we might have in that information based on their expertise, their credibility. We talk about how authority is constructed in different contexts, that somebody who is an authoritative biologist may not be an authoritative lawmaker, right? So we have built authority, but we have it in a context. And how much authority you need may depend on the information need you have. So as we become experts in this idea, we can define the different types of authority, we can recognize the context and understand the increasingly social nature of information ecosystems. A learner who has really sort of embodied this idea is motivated to find authoritative sources. They know the importance of assessing content with a stance of skepticism, and they might question traditional notions of authority and try to value diverse ideas. So as we move into our breakout rooms, not there yet, we're going to have some questions on this particular frame. So we're going to say, what type of authority, if any, does a text generated by AI have? Does the use of generative AI enhance or detract from a student's development of their own authoritative voice? And when we're looking at a text, do we have a good way to know if it is or isn't generated by AI, right? Is it identifying itself as something that came out of an LLM, or is it a little bit deceptive in how it's presented? And how does that change our ability to actually evaluate the authority of a text? And our next frame is going to be presented by Clarissa.
Great, thank you, Olivia. I am Clarissa Eisen. I'm also in the library doing research, teaching, and learning. Frame 2 is one of my personal favorite frames. It is information creation is a process. So this is the view that the fun and the learning is in the journey, not the product. So information is produced to convey a certain message and is shared in a very selected delivery method. And this impacts what information is in there and the audience. What's most important is the iterative process, going over and doing that research, creating, revising, sharing, finding that information again. And finally, the resulting product reflects differences in the process. So this is just what the frame says. An expert researchers are looking at that underlying process of creation in order to evaluate the usefulness of information. So to become an expert, you would need certain knowledge practices and dispositions. These are just a sampling of them. But a knowledge practice would be knowing how to articulate the capabilities and constraints of information through those different processes. So if you're creating something for a podcast or a research article, those will have different capabilities and constraints. Those dispositions include showing that you value the process of matching an information need with the appropriate product, accepting the ambiguity surrounding value of information creation expressed. So our next questions would be, what is the process of creating information through AI? And is that information actually created? Are parts of the process missing when AI is used, and are parts of the process added? And finally, I just really loved the accepts the ambiguity surrounding potential value. And I don't think we accept the ambiguity enough. So how do we teach students? How do we ourselves learn to accept ambiguity with or without thinking about and using AI? And our next frame is that information has value. I'm a librarian, of course, I think it just has intrinsic value, but information also has extrinsic value. We can put a price on information. It has several different dimensions, including as a commodity, a means for education, a way to influence people, and the way that people understand and negotiate their world. As a result of information having value in all of these different ways, we have legal and socioeconomic interests that influence how information is produced and shared. Think of copyright or plagiarism. So experts understand their rights and responsibilities, participating in a community of scholarship, and the value that can be wielded to marginalize certain voices. Experts also understand that the individual is responsible for making those deliberate and informed choices. They have knowledge practices that show how they understand and recognize issues of access or lack of access to information. and how the commodification of their personal information and online interactions affects what they receive and what they produce or disseminate. And finally, they respect the individual ideas of others. They respect and value the skills and time needed to produce information. They see themselves as contributors, and are inclined to examine their own privileges. So those questions, what value is gained through using AI and what value is lost, who benefits and who loses when we're thinking about AI and information's value, and then how do students learn about access or lack of access to information now? And we'll go back to Olivia for the final frame. Olivia, you're still muted.
The fourth frame we want to talk about today is research as inquiry. And I really like this frame because it talks about the iterative nature of research and how as we become more competent in any given field, we're going to ask increasingly complex or new questions, which are then going to turn us to the direction of more questions and more lines of inquiry. So we're really focused on the idea that questions are unresolved. We're less concerned in this frame with things that are really well known. We want to discuss things that are unknown. And we recognize that there's a spectrum of inquiry here where learners who are new to an area of knowledge can ask those more basic questions, but we're expecting them to increase the complexity as time moves on. So their knowledge practices and dispositions look more like formulating questions based on information gaps, being able to gather information to address those gaps and to understand the weaknesses in any existing arguments. There's a lot of emphasis here on synthesizing gathered information and valuing curiosity. So as I begin to think about how this frame might speak to AI, I'm thinking about what those LLMs are doing and how if I'm on Amazon and there's like 800 reviews for something, they're going to offer me an AI synthesized report on all of those reviews, right? So what does AI do to me as a learner trying to build a knowledge practice around synthesis if there are tools who are going to present me with pre-synthesized information? So some of the questions we'll be looking at here are around this idea of does it enhance or detract from our own ability to develop these knowledge practices? How important is it for us as humans to generate our own research questions versus having a tool that can read through all of nature and tell us where the gaps in the literature are and say, you should research this. We're asking our students to follow legal and ethical guidelines. But do AI tools meet those same standards? Like when they harvest this information, are they adhering to the same ethical guidelines that we set forward for ourselves? And who bears the responsibility for ethical use of AI tools? Is it the companies creating them, individual users, or both? So this feels like a good moment to go into some breakout rooms. So there are 4 presenters. We'll get, you've heard from 3 of the 4 of us. And we're each gonna hang out with you in a breakout room for about 8 minutes. I'm gonna drop the discussion questions into the chat, or rather a link to the discussion questions in the chat. And we'll hopefully get you talking in just a moment. This is the part where we get by with a little help from our CTRO friends.
Okay, are y'all seeing the breakout rooms?
No.
Move to
No.
it.
Ah, there it
Oh,
is.
there you go.
Thank you. All right, welcome back, everyone. I don't know about your other rooms, but we were literally mid-sentence having a really great conversation around authority in AI. So I want to thank all of our participants for being game to join a breakout room and have this information literacy discussion with us. I think our next slides are going to take us to Ashley.
All right, thank you, everyone. So we spent a lot of our chunk of time today talking about and exploring this framework for information literacy and how each of these 4 frames overlap with these new generative AI technologies, which then brings us to sort of the next step along the process, which is thinking about how can we look at what this actually could look like when applied to the classroom setting. So I have this quote here. It's from an Inside Higher Ed article about professors who are actually using ChatGPT instruction in the classroom. This one professor was talking about how it's kind of a horse out of the barn situation. It's here to stay. We know it's not going away. No matter what any individual personally feels about it, the reality is that we don't want to necessarily be the ones fighting the evolution of this new technology. Our job in higher education setting is helping our students learn as much as we can. And so we want to think about how can we go about doing that. So on the next slide, if we're thinking about this framework for information literacy and using it in the classroom and incorporating instruction and information about these generative AI tools, one of the goals that we want out of this, which Olivia mentioned earlier, is that we want to create users of AI technologies that can be both critical consumers of the knowledge and information that they encounter on a daily basis, and that can be competent contributors to shared knowledge. So they know how to evaluate the information that they're getting, and they know how to create high quality and accurate information as well. So in thinking about that goal, then we can break it down into kind of smaller steps in terms of what we can actually do as educators. So we are able to help students navigate all the steps of the knowledge creation process. That's sort of what we're all trying to do here. We're getting students used to doing their own research, thinking about that process of inquiry and that process of scholarship. And now we can mix in how can they do that each step using those AI tools. We can help students use generative AI tools to get them started with, but not necessarily replace the thinking work that they have to do. When you think about if they're trying to just pass off something as their own, but they didn't write it, they didn't check it, that's where we're going to get into problems really quickly. But if they can use it to maybe get them started thinking about a topic or what has previously been done in a field, then you can get kind of a more useful and more ethical use of an AI tool like ChatGPT. And then we also can't forget that we have to help students navigate the potential hazards when using AI, because they are there. Generative AI tools are creating new content that have never existed before. They're not just showing folks or giving folks information that already exists, something like what Siri does. And so you have the potential for hallucinations, misalignment, where you're not getting out of the tool what you need from it, or bias. So on the next slide, then we have exactly what students would need to know how to do to be able to use a generative AI tool effectively. So in general, the first bullet point on this slide is sort of good research practice to start with. So we want our students to be able to accurately cite information that they use. So they're able to evaluate what's a good source. They're able to evaluate the accuracy of the information they come across. And then they're able to use that to create their own further their own knowledge and the research in a particular field. And that goes alongside with, kind of the flip side of the coin, teaching students not to cite things they've never read before. So a lot of alarm has come up in media about, you can ask ChatGPT for citations for a certain topic and it'll make them up. because it is designed to imitate human language. It is not necessarily designed for use as a database. And so not necessarily everything that comes out of it is going to be factually accurate. So having students, understand that they need to put in the work to kind of make sure those things actually exist and read those citations before they decide to use them is good research practice as a baseline. Students also need to know how to effectively guide AI tools to get good work. These tools only work and only produce content as well as they're guided. And students might not always understand that they might not get optimal content or optimal output the first time that they put a prompt in. They might not realize they may need to take several steps and do a lot of further interactions to kind of refine down and get exactly what they need. So we want to think about how we can teach students to get the results they need out of a tool like ChatGPT instead of garbage. So in our breakout room, somebody mentioned, you put garbage in, you get garbage out. And so that definitely applies to a tool like ChatGPT. And so if we can help practice with students how to create the most useful text prompts that yield effective answers for them, that will help them both along the research process and then hopefully help them to think critically about the output they're getting from a tool. The third bullet point, we would also like to make sure that our students know how to leverage generative AI to get them started on a task. So tools like ChatGPT can help students get started thinking about a certain topic, get started searching about the important themes or frameworks that are used in a certain discipline, and then they can hopefully use that information to figure out where to go next with their research project. So something like ChatGPT or other generative AI tools could help them break complex problems and questions down into smaller ones to kind of refine the scope of their research. Maybe it could help them find search terms, refine research questions, and things like that. So a lot of students have trouble sometimes with getting from, I have this really cool topic I'm interested in, but I'm not quite sure how to actually get to the final result. And so generative AI tools can help them to kind of break down the project and do each step. And then the last one here, we cannot forget, as I mentioned before, we need to help students understand how to use these types of tools responsibly. They need to understand that they should evaluate the information that they get out of a generative AI tool with skepticism. If they understand a little bit about how AI works, about what ChatGPT is actually trying to accomplish and all the biases it contains, they can become better and more responsible users of it. So in all, our learners will be best served if we can provide them for opportunities to build their skills in meaningful and relevant AI activities. So here are some ideas of what this could look like, kind of some concrete examples, as the slide says, things you might want to consider. So if you are trying to introduce skills to have your students learn how to use AI effectively and responsibly, it can be a very good idea to have your students directly engage with AI tools under managed conditions. So we can proactively teach them the right skills to get what they need, and then kind of prevent or try to prevent inaccurate use or unethical use of AI tools rather than waiting and trying to kind of catch them later. So things like maybe teaching them how to use AI to get started on a research project, like I just described, all the ways you could do that. We could have prompt engineering instruction, where students are actually learning how to refine the prompt that they put into a tool to get better quality information out of it. Best practices, in the next couple of years are going to become refined as more and more folks try to do this and then figure out what works the best. We have a link in our slides here for one professor who's a writing professor who created their own set of best practices for using and teaching how to use generative AI in the writing classroom. And then the last idea is to maybe consider having students use generative AI tools as part of an assessment process, maybe in an exam, maybe as part of a project that they're doing. Again, thinking about using these tools under managed conditions so they're learning how to use them effectively and accurately, and then boosting their skills and confidence. This isn't to say there aren't challenges. There are a lot of challenges with AI. It seems like for a lot of folks, these generative AI tools like ChatGPT and other sorts of similar tools were kind of thrust on us very quickly. And so one of the major challenges will be developing instructor literacy in AI alongside the students. Because in order to teach the students effectively, the instructors need to know how to use it effectively as well. And this is a big deal, right? Instructors are busy. They don't have a ton of time. Change is hard. You know, all of these things are realities and big challenges. The second thing is equitable access to AI technologies and resources. So failure to ensure access to AI tools and education in different schools can potentially widen the digital divide and perpetuate unequal learning opportunities and outcomes for different communities of students. Especially, you keep seeing articles and interviews where folks are saying things like, soon AI skills are going to be table stakes for getting a good job. Soon, humans with AI skills will replace humans without those skills. You know, we cannot just forget or leave groups of students behind. I think a two-pronged approach to this with access is best. We can't necessarily, at the moment at AU, solve the financial access problem, although I'm sure something will develop over time. But what we can control right now is access to education, skills development, and access to, you know, the opportunities to effectively use and evaluate AI tools and technologies. And then the last thing here, generative AI tools are biased. It is part of the way that they are built. They're trained with a data set of human communication, and they're trained to mimic what humans do. And humans as a whole group are biased. So this is not necessarily something we here at AU can fix in the tool itself. But what we can control is ways that we can try to mitigate it through this information literacy style instruction. So teaching students to recognize through this information literacy instruction when the information they get out of a tool is showing unacceptable biases, unacceptable stereotypes, and then what they can do about it, rather than just passing that information along. Okay, so we're basically right at time. I do want to remind you of our session title today, From Panic to Purpose. So we wanted to end by reminding you that you're not alone here at AU. We're all in this together. We're all interested in doing the best we can with this new technology and controlling the things that we can control while working to help our students as best as we can. So to that end, we wanted to end our presentation today with some AU resources that you can make use of to get the support whenever it is that you need it. So we have a whole group of folks at the library who are available to help you with designing information literacy instruction, including that type of instruction with a focus on AI, and that's completely tailored to your specific course needs. CTRL also has a group of very talented teaching and learning specialists who are available to help you with any pedagogical questions that you might have related to AI and your teaching. And then every school also has an embedded instructional designer that you can reach out to if you want some support kind of with the more detailed work. So adapting your course activities or possibly your assessments for this kind of new world of AI. So thank you so much for your attention today. Thank you for my colleagues who presented with me. We are happy to hang around for a little bit and answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you.
Thank you all. I really appreciate the focus on information literacy.
Yeah, I think it's a huge step in the right direction. And like I kind of mentioned, it is something we can control. We can try to do the best that we can do with what we have available to us to help out students.
Most certainly. Thank you all.
Thank you all for being game to chat with us in breakout rooms. That was really helpful.
I have a quick question about ethical use. Is there something like a norm of disclosure that people are starting to use? You know, when they say, "Hey, I use ChatGPT to generate an early iteration of this literature review for the following essay," or something like that. Is that happening yet?
ChatGPT will actually give you a citation for itself. It has a citation reference that it lets you, it fills out for you, telling like, this is what you add to your paper to say that I use ChatGPT.
But in the same way that we sort of disclose that we received funding from our university for this essay, is there standard language that people are starting to use at the outset of an essay, for example, on how they used AI?
I haven't seen any at the outset. I have seen it used sort of like the grant funding thing at the very end, and using the little citation that ChatGPT kicks out.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I don't know if there's sort of a set standard yet that everyone is kind of deciding on or focusing in on. I think that's probably something that's going to have to come in the future.
All right, thank you all.
Thanks.
Anybody else have questions for us?
Quick question, this is Robin. Did I hear someone say that one of the writing studies instructors was placing a link to best practices in the chat?
So it's not in the chat, but once we post the slides on the conference website, the link is in there. So
Okay.
It's not somebody at AU, it's another institution, but it is a writing studies professor.
Okay, thank you.
There, I dropped it in the chat.
Thank you, Olivia.
Yep. Well, good job, team. That was a lot of content. And we finished on
We
time.
just squeaked by.
We didn't have time for the whiteboard at the end, but
No.